Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend Alfonso Rachel, and this is the Virtue Signal, where we try to look at kind of the philosophical underpinnings of today's political swirl. Zoe, we got a real interesting one today. Before we talk about this, I just want to say very quickly to the people watching, because we have a membership that's stepped up and decided to pay for shows like this, we get to talk about whatever we want to on this show. And we don't have any fears about anything. There's nobody who can fire us. We had a chance to actually speak the truth, and we wanted to thank the members out there who made it possible and the people who actually made one-time donations over at BillWhittle.com. So, Zoe, I want to go right to the teeth of this because I saw something yesterday that I think really highlights the genuine major racial issues in America today. So I saw a clip yesterday about a guy who was an Air Force major, and he was an extremely well-spoken guy, black man. And he had been flying F-22 Raptors, which is the top of the line, absolute top of the world combat aircraft. They're making hundreds of F-35s, but the F-22 Raptor is the top of the line. And this guy was on 60 Minutes, and he was talking about how after 11 years in the Air Force, racism was forcing him out, that he couldn't take it anymore, and so he's going to get a degree in Harvard Law. Now, when he listed the reasons why he was leaving the Air Force, he said things like, people expected me to conform, or they said you're talking too quiet or you're talking too loud. They said gee, you're too intimidating, all kinds of things. Here's the thing I want to get to. In the comment section below this, since it was ABC News, there were a number of comments. I probably saw 30 comments from people who were black service people who said, this happens all the time. We see it every day, all the time, everywhere we go. And there were pretty much equal number of comments from people who said things like, he's upset because they ask him to conform. That's what the military is. How much prejudice could there be if you're leaving as a young major who's flying F-22s? So one side is saying that there's this racism that white people just don't see, and the other side is saying this guy is being either intentionally or unintentionally oversensitive to the same kind of criticisms that apply to everybody. And I looked at these comments and I said, both of these things are true.
Well, I tell you what, Bill, it's a hard one to swallow, man, because I mean, you have a person who's black, and in this age of everything is white supremacy, it's like, we're going to go ahead and give this guy the keys to an aircraft of air superiority, right? So we're
the best airplane in the arsenal and the most expensive,
right? So
with the exception of the B-2, yeah.
Right. So let's give him the keys to that. And in my personal experience, Bill, now when I went to go, and unfortunately, it never really came to pass. But I wanted to get my commercial license, and you would be surprised how ecstatic they were to say, "You want to learn how to fly? That's awesome." You know, it was like, and it would tell me, it's like, man, we wish that more blacks would pursue becoming pilots, you know, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, here I am, man. Let's make it happen. You know, they wanted me to be instructor and everything, man. And I didn't even think, you know, I'm like, okay, hey, look, man, I just want to go ahead and get my pilot's license. But,
right.
You know, but you're right, Bill, you know, going in, there is going to be this, you know, conformity. There's a reason why it's called GI, government issue. You go in, you belong to the military, right? And this, it's a shame that people want to turn the experience into this all about meism. And it's like, okay, look, you're going into the military because you're supposed to be prepared to make a sacrifice, but you're wanting all these sacrifices to be made for you. You know,
right.
And I don't get that.
That's what a lot of people were saying who were opposed to this guy's opinion.
Right. You know, and it takes all kinds, Bill, whether it's, you know, people, concerning their skin color, concerning their gender, concerning their orientation, all these modifications that have to be done for them, all this watering down. And it's like, look, you're going to go into the military and you're going to get talked to like a dog. You're going to go into the military and you can't do anything right. You're going to have, Irish pennants on you that you need cut off. Oh, you can't say Irish pennants anymore. That's racist. So we're going to have to change that. Everything
That's a loose thread for those of you out there who not up on military jargon. If you got a little loose thread hanging, that's an Irish pennant.
Right. And there's reasons for all these things, man. There's that you're going to have to be, you're going to be picked on. You're going to be, cut down and all these sorts of things because there has to be an account for all these things, that people have to do. And for people to get so sensitive and hung up about these things where it's, and let me just say this really quick, Bill. If this person is deciding that he's going to give up flying and he wants to go on to Harvard Law because he wants to take this social justice thing to a whole nother level, then maybe they were right about him. It's like, man,
that's what I was thinking. What a lot of other
I'm
people
saying?
were thinking.
Okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, they were saying no. They were saying he was alluding to the fact that the rest of his squadron mates were giving him a hard time and saying things like, "I'm not trying hard enough." Mm. Well, maybe if you decide to walk away from the F-22 Raptor in order to go to Harvard Law School, maybe there is a lack of commitment to your squadron that your squadron mates are seeing, and maybe it has nothing to do with your skin color. Mm-hmm. And this was my impression too, but I do want to address this, and I really want to be fair about it. The number of black servicemen who just see the same thing every single time convinced me that there's clearly something going on here that is not just this guy's imagination. I don't know how much of it is real. That's why we thought we'd talk about it today. I have a good friend of mine, who back in the 80s was an air traffic controller in the Air Force, and he was a sergeant. He was responsible for training new trainees. And he said he noticed not an awful lot, but enough for it to register, that he would give instructions or corrections to people, and then occasionally he would give instructions or corrections or whatever to black enlisted men, and they got very resentful and would later make a report that it was because of racism. And I think there's certainly some of that out there.
Yeah.
But there is also, you can't deny the testimony of all of those people who said, no, there's definitely a sense of unacceptance that they're out there. So what about this idea that it's clear that there are many people out there, many white people think there just isn't any racial prejudice out there anymore. And when you talk about guys like at your flight school, that's certainly how I would react and how all the people I know would react. Be very glad to see you. But they're reacting to something, these people that posted all those things.
Yes. And like I said, but there's enough truth to go around for all of it. I'm not the kind of person who says that there's no such thing as systemic racism. I'm not the kind of person that says that there's no white supremacy or anything that makes a person feel uncomfortable. What I do say is, yes, these things exist and follow the trail to where it goes. So for me, I can see that all this white privilege, white supremacy, systemic racism, it's like, look, you can follow the Democrats for that. That's a real thing. And I don't give them a free pass as far as that goes. Now with this, it's like everything, we're being made, Bill. We're being made to see racism in everything. And it's going to make people overly sensitive about it. I'm going to kind of rabbit trail here just a little bit. I'm actually seeing people getting offended because, like, when you see the commercials and stuff like that, a lot of commercials are showing interracial relationships. Right. And there are people who are being made to feel like it's being shoved down their throats. Now, nobody should really feel like that because that is America. It's like, there's interracial relationships. It's a real thing in America, and it's nothing to be hung up on. However, it is a kind of thing to get hung up on when you see the agenda of it. Like for myself, I made a production where there was an interracial relationship. And the thing about it was just supposed to look normal. And I was hoping conservatives would help me get ahead of this because I knew that if they didn't, the liberals would take off with it and they would do something perverted with it. Right. And they're doing that. And people are starting. And it's like every once in a while I see where people I'm getting sick of this. I'm tired of this whole interracial thing getting shoved down our throat. And I'm like, oh no. It's like you're helping them do what they're agenda is planning for. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make people sick of this and trying to draw racism out of people. All that to say, Bill, yes, you can see it where these people will start making these comments about it because people are being made to be overly sensitive about it and will find racism in anything. They'll find sexism in anything. You name it, man. Like, we talked about earlier. It could be flipping Dr. Seuss, racist.
Well, what those conservatives are reacting to, and I agree to a large degree, they're kind of being trolled into it. But there is something that they're reacting to. If you look at modern advertising, especially in the last year or two, the amount of mixed race relationships and things like a bank commercial, I mean, it's virtually 100%. Or at the very least, it's 0% white people. That all across the advertising spectrum now, this is what people have to do in order to avoid the woke mob.
Yeah.
And I think people are reacting a little bit to being written out of their own culture. And that's a whole different story, which we'll probably do on another episode here. But you say something, that's really profound, and that is this idea that we're being made to do it. I don't want to give away the punchline, but my Moving Back to America show this week is about a story on how racist the national parks are. And I broke down the statistics, and you realize just how much, in this particular case, the LA Times and ABC News are manufacturing synthetic injustice to keep people enraged about something that's not a problem at all. When you look at the locations and demographics, it's just not a problem. It's a problem that is created by lying with statistics, and I'm able to show you exactly how much of a lie that is. But the bigger issue is that this is what the Frankfurt School theory says. If we're going to have a totalitarian world, we cannot have one with America standing in the way. We cannot have a country predicated on liberty and on individuality standing in the way of us ruling the world. And so if we're going to bring down America, and America is not going to go down economically because communism is a failure and capitalism is an enormous success. American workers have cars and homes and air conditionings and all the rest of it. So the Frankfurt School said, let's make this about the dispossessed. They're going to be the van of the revolution. We're going to use critical theory to convince every single minority group and every single identity group in the country that this country is the worst place in the world, and it exists to basically steal from you and keep you down. And the entire point of critical theory is you can't have Hispanics criticizing blacks or gays criticizing women. Everything has to criticize the middle. And this is the kind of thing that I saw with this guy. And I think one of the reasons, though, is I saw a segment that our friend Glenn Reynolds did on Fox, and he said, like, the percentage of people in this country who actively identify themselves as like woke activists, he said it's like 3%. He said if they're loud enough, that's enough to really change a culture, bring it down. And I get the sense that all across the country, everywhere, everybody is watching this happen, and no one can believe it's happening, and nobody knows why such a small number of people, bad people with bad agendas, are making such enormous changes and getting away with it. And I realize that it's got to do with guilt and fundamentally decency. I think you might have mentioned this on one of our shows. I'm going to do the next show after this one on the national park system. I'm going to, in movies or TV, I'm sure you know this, if you watch a scene where you've got a TV series and you've got this horrible battle raging and people are just dropping dead everywhere, but you've got your four characters who are your regular characters, they somehow manage to survive this battle. And when it's obvious like that, kind of the inside joke is to say, well, they're wearing their plot armor, right? They've got their plot armor on. They can't be killed in this battle because we need them later in the plot. One of the things you said, I'm pretty sure, was the idea that these people have underdog armor. The idea that the underdog is automatically right is a big part of the American psyche. The identification with the underdog in America, the decency of thinking that the little guy fighting the big guy is a good story. But when you get right down to it, I think the reason that people assume this is because for our entire lives, we've been given movies and TV shows and songs and everything else about how the underdog is morally superior, always, and the people who have the power are automatically oppressors and wrong. That's a great story to tell, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the real world.
Indeed, it's not. And I hope that folks realize that that's why movies are called movies, and it's supposed to be a thing where you're supposed to suspend disbelief. But the thing is that we keep trying to make movies believable. You know, you want to make sure that you're in the experience. So it's like a hard thing. You know, it's like, we know that this is supposed to be fantasy, but we keep trying to make these things as plausible as possible to reflect reality, or reality reflect the movie. I don't know which one it's supposed to be. But, you know, when we're talking about reality and when we're, you know, talking about illegal immigrants and stuff like that, you know, we're made to believe that America is this racist and oppressive country. And I've said this for a long time. It doesn't add up. And it's like, if you really think that that's what it is, why is everybody trying to come here? You know,
yeah, that's kind of funny how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, let's go to that racist, oppressive country, America, and then curse it for being just like the place we just left. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, right?
When I'm watching this interview of this guy, really brilliant guy, and hundreds of comments saying, "We're so sorry about this horrible oppression that you've experienced, and good luck in the world," and so on, and on and on and on. And every now and then somebody would say something like, "Gee, I wonder if the Chinese would have let you fly their top fighter, or whether the Russians would have, or whether anybody else would have," and so here we are, with this world where we're just end up talking past each other, and if you tell some people that there is a sort of a systematic issue there, they'll say, "No, I'm not a racist, so therefore it doesn't exist." And conversely, if you tell other people that no, the enormous majority of people in this country, white people and black people, all of them, are people of goodwill who just want people to succeed. But that can't possibly be true either. It's this manufacturing of injustice, and it's an indication sometimes of how little genuine injustice there is remaining. There's certainly been there in the past. But as you watch the progressives focus more and more and more on smaller and smaller and smaller issues like this one, how much injustice really is there? This guy's uncle, by the way, was a Tuskegee Airman. Now, that guy experienced real, genuine prejudice and racism. Yes. And I think, and a couple of people said that uncle would have been very disappointed with this guy who, after 11 years, has decided that he can't take it anymore and is leaving the F-22 and heading to Harvard Law School, and I would bet a political career beyond it as well. And when you watch him interacting with his squadron mates on the video, seems to be great. And I said, what was it like learning how to fly the F-22? He says, it was an absolute blast. I don't imagine that anybody who's genuinely oppressed would ever say something like that. You know, what was, did you enjoy, not having to do this in the coal mines when you went down there? You know, how was the coal mining thing you had to do? It was an absolute blast. So here we are. And the only way to get past these things is to actually talk about them and understand that there's some truth to both sides. But what I think is relevant about this story is that 60 Minutes created this story of institutionalized racism in the United States Air Force, presented one side of the story, made every single vague assumption. They looked at me funny, or I thought that this guy was treating me different. All of that was taken verbatim as evidence of institutionalized racism. Nobody's telling the other side of the story. Nobody was there saying, listen, if you're going to be a fighter pilot of any kind, your life is going to consist of people, including especially your squadron mates, making things as difficult for you as possible because they know they've got to depend on you. And this is not the kind of job for people who are easily offended. If you're going to be a combat pilot, you've got to have nerves of steel and you've got to have ice water in your veins. If you get emotional, you're going to die. And this guy struck me as very emotional. And so now the question is, was the racism real, or was it a question of his buddies in the Air Force saying, this guy's kind of a showboat. This guy seems to be posturing for a political position, or whatever the case may be. The point is that 60 Minutes did nothing to even suggest, let alone produce, nothing to suggest that there might be any other reason for this other than this institutional and growing racism in the Air Force, which of course needs to be completely restructured.
Indeed, man. It's there's no room for it, for racism anywhere. And there's no room for in that tight cockpit, man, there's no room for these insecurities. You know, there just isn't. And like I said, I'm not there, but at the same time, I do have my experiences with it. And people will try to play this up. And it's like, look, man, I really try not to base how I look at the world on my own personal experience. I'm just not that selfish. My ego's just not that big to where it's
Imagine that.
You know, I know my hat barely fits on my head because my head is, I try to keep my peanut head pretty small. I try not to let it inflate too much. But the thing is, I can't view the world and judge the world as this general thing based on my own experiences. You know, but as far as he goes, you know, hey, maybe he really did, but it's one of those things again, Bill, you have to be able to keep those things in check, man, because worse things could happen to you. You know, if you get, like, say, for instance, you get shot down and you get captured, they're going to do a heck of a lot worse. And they're going to have some real prejudices against you, man. Trust me. So the thing is, you know, but we're in a culture where people have to compete with their victimhood. I'm more of a victim. It's like a competition, man.
Yeah.
We can hand out trophies for who's the bigger victim. And the bigger victim you are, somehow, the more empowered you are. That's an oxymoron for real, man. I'm a highly empowered victim. It doesn't make any sense. You know, and Booker T. Washington, you know, he talked about these things. There's people who are going to capitalize on these things. People who are going to play up the plight of particularly he's talking about as far as the black community goes. There's going to be people who are going to play up the plight and they're going to make an industry of these things. And, you know, so from the get-go, unfortunately, with the black community, right out the chute, man, they're taught to be victims. You know, like even, there was one thing on the news where this woman was talking to, her kid about the proper etiquette to being stopped by police. When you're stopped by police, you have to do this, because you're black. It's like, no, if you get stopped by police, you have to do this because you got stopped by police. Doesn't matter what color you are. But right from the get-go, this person is teaching their kid to be insecure. Right. It's your stop.
And be nervous and terrified when a policeman comes up. And if a policeman comes up to a car and sees somebody very antsy and nervous, then the policeman's, radar starts to go off and he starts getting a little tense because most people don't behave that way if they haven't done anything. And the next thing you know, you're in that place.
Right. It leads to a bad thing. So it's a weird, like I said, Bill, pride and insecurity are two sides of the same coin. You're taught to be so insecure, but at the same time have so much pride in your race. It's like, well, which one is it? Which one am I supposed to be? So that will follow a person even all the way up. They'll take that insecurity and rather than just being grateful, dude, you can't be grateful that you get to, you know, despite what everybody else says, like, yeah, you can say whatever you want. You can call me this, you can call me that. While I'm getting ready to go into this flying machine, you know,
this guy, that's the argument but the arguments were 5 or 6 to 1 in terms of you poor man, I'm so sorry you had to endure this. But other people were pointing out how prejudiced can the Air Force be if they are giving this person who they are, according to the accusations, assume is an inferior person? How prejudiced can the Air Force be giving him one of a limited number, never more to be created, of the best fighter jet in the Air Force? It's a little tough to talk about how you've been kept down while you're a major coming out of the F-22s voluntarily to go to Harvard Law School. It's just a lot of people felt like, honestly, and I'll just give you one more thing to wrap this segment up. I've been very lucky. In fact, this is my favorite part of the work I do. I've had a chance to actually interface with the military on a number of different occasions. I had a naming ceremony for me by actual Air Force pilots back when I was flying.
Wow.
And yeah, it was amazing. It was one of the best days of my life. And when they're picking your call sign, they're looking. You don't get to go around and say, I'm Maverick and I'm Iceman. No, the entire purpose of your call sign is to remind you of your weaknesses and to poke you in the side all the time so that you don't get overly confident. And when they were trying to pick call sign names for me, the only one that I can mention on the show as a possibility was gay porn. That was one of the call signs that was available for me. Now, I chose not to take that personally, but I suppose I could have. And I've also been... For instance, there's one of my favorite videos on the web is a bunch of shooters doing gagging style, guys launching off a carrier deck. And one of the guys doing that is I think Captain Spears or Major Spears. And his call sign is Brittany. Now, pretty obvious why you'd call him that. And I think if you got overly upset about the fact that you wanted to be Iceman, but you ended up being called Brittany, then maybe the Air Force isn't for you. And I've also been on board both a destroyer and a submarine, and I understand when visitors are on a ship, I understand that is not the behavior that goes on all the time, because when you're in the company of strangers in your house, you don't necessarily, well, you put on clothes, right? But what I was very interested in was I was watching the people who were not in my immediate vicinity. If we were talking with an officer over here, I was looking down the hall. I was looking in the mess area, and I was looking at people who were in the corner of the hangar on the destroyer. And I was watching how they interacted with each other. And the thing that struck me about what I saw in the military was that this is the most colorblind society I'd ever seen. That there were so many people from so many different areas. And I sat and talked to a guy who had been basically from a real poor neighborhood in New York, and he was going to get a football scholarship, but they canceled the football program. He's in the Navy. When he gets out, he's going to go back to his neighborhood, start a football thing. And this guy seemed absolutely, completely at ease here. And that's why I see things like this. And to be honest with you, I watched it yesterday. It just once again just kind of broke my heart. Not just watching it, but watching the number of people that wow, this guy must have really suffered.
I tell you, man. One, just like you said, when you're gonna fly this plane. Look, man, we don't see how racism plays into it. I mean, we could say the same thing about Obama being president. It's like, really? All this racism that y'all are talking about? Well, we had a black president. You know that, right? And, but, working around military personnel, when I hear bigotry in the military, I don't think I've ever heard, the only time I ever hear the N-word so much is, well, one, if I happen to hear a gangster rap album, I hear that a lot. And when I'm next to military personnel, I don't think I've ever heard the N-word used so much in my life, right? And it starts to grate on you. I'm like, how are you guys going to sit there and complain about race? Because they'll complain about racism, but I'm like, nobody calls each other the N-word more than you guys do. And not only that, you have this music that you guys bump loud, and white people are listening to it also, which means that you're inviting them to say the N-word as well. And this industry makes billions of dollars off of doing that. And then while you have white people going out there singing along to the N-word song, then you want to turn around and call them racist and accuse them of using racial slurs. It's like something that you can't win. So I know that there is this element of bigotry that people hear, and they hear all this racial language, but it's a lot of this stuff is things that they invite and they heap it onto themselves. And, at some point, people need to, but they'll justify it. They'll justify it and say, well, it's just it doesn't mean anything. Well, if it has no value, why do you keep saying it? Or if it's just a term of endearment, then why is it that you just got mad at this person and you're ready to fight with them and you're calling him the N-word all day long? It sounds like a pretty hateful term to me. So they make an environment of these things. They invest in this environment of things, and then they want to turn around and accuse the military of being a racist environment.
I've often wondered if somebody would do all of us a favor and just print a card out, just a card with, this is the skin tone, darker than this skin tone, you can use the N-word, lighter than this tone, no. It'd be convenient for everybody if you could just kind of hold it up to your face and see whether you're allowed to use this word or not. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're here. Nobody seems to have the courage to ask simple questions out there anymore, because so many people are so deep in their trenches. Alfonso Rachel and I have a chance to talk about these things because we deeply respect each other's work, and we're friends, and we both know we're people of goodwill. And I think all of the country is that way as well. The only way to get past this stuff is to talk about it. The way to make things worse is to go down the progressive road of saying, you can't possibly understand this because you're white. To me, that's like me saying, how can you possibly understand Hamlet? Because you're black. This is set in Denmark. What could you possibly connect to with this? It's a lie. It's an evil lie. And it's a dirty lie.
Yes.
And it's got to be fought at every opportunity. For my friend Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. This is The Virtue Signal. We'll see you next time right here at BillWhittle.com.